In your opinion, what do you think were the biggest takeaways? What really stood out to you today?
What stood out to me is the compelling evidence that Donald Trump lied. He lied repeatedly about this myth of voter fraud. And, you know, as you all were just discussing a moment ago, he heard from multiple people within his orbit that there was no evidence to show voter fraud that would change the election results. And he heard that not just from his official appointees like the Attorney General, Bill Barr, but he heard that from people throughout his campaign apparatus, his number crunchers, his general counsel. They were all telling him the same thing, that there was just no evidence that the election results were wrong. And what we have to remember, and this is what makes, I think, the hearing so effective today, is that these are the voices of Trump supporters over and over again saying this and telling. These are not Democrats. These are not independents. These are true MAGA believers. These were people who were running his campaign or his top appointees. So they were all telling him repeatedly, and he still went forward with his lie and the big conspiracy to overthrow the election.
But not everybody was saying that it was a lie. There were still people around the president who were with him. Take Rudy Giuliani, for instance. Also, at the same time, we were talking with Andrew Rafferty earlier about this idea of counterprogramming. As these hearings are taking place, he is on True Social, his social media outlet, saying that a lot of this is still a lie. So how do you square all of that at the end of the day? Because I understand that there are competing narratives that were taking place not just then, but are taking place now.
That's a great point. But what we heard was that Team Normal, as they called themselves, and again, these were the true Trump supporters within the campaign, they were replaced by Giuliani and others who were on a team that was not playing in real facts. And what Donald Trump essentially did was he got a bunch of new yes men and yes women to surround himself with, and they all fed each other these fanciful lies about election fraud. They knew that it wasn't true, or they had reason to know absolutely it wasn't true. But you're right, to this day, many people believe it. And it's in part because Donald Trump so effectively used social media and the regular media to repeat this lie over and over again. But that was part of his conspiracy. That was part of the big plan, is to get enough Americans to believe the big lie so that they would go along with him trying to overturn the valid election results.
How do you think that's going to impact these hearings overall? I mean, there are still days to go, right? We are just on day 2 at this point. But again, the counterprogramming continues. So how do you think that will play out?
It's hard to know how it's going to play out. What I'm optimistic about is that a lot of Americans are watching. Over 20 million people watched it on TV, but that doesn't even count all of the people who are streaming it and who are seeing clips. So tens of millions of Americans are tuning in, and they're getting this very compelling case. It's true that others are not tuning in, and they're continuing to get their information from a very different news source, and they're continuing to hear what Donald Trump has to say about this and believing him. So that's a larger problem going on in our democracy right now about where people receive their information. But what I've got to hope is that with each passing hearing, these bipartisan hearings where we're using the committee is using the voices of Republicans, of Trump supporters, that it's going to create a national dialogue around this. People want accountability. People want to know that their vote counts and that there's a valid transition of presidential power and that the loser can't just overthrow the results when he or she doesn't like it.
So people want accountability, and you said that more than 20 million Americans watched day 1 of these hearings. What do you think the overall goal is at the end of the day? What do you think all Americans want to see as the outcome?
I think Americans want to see the full facts. They want the facts presented in a nonpartisan way. And I should mention that the committee's work is led by several nonpartisan former prosecutors. So the Americans want to know that the facts are being presented in good faith, that the dots are going to be connected in good faith, and then they want accountability for anybody who was involved in any law breaking. And ultimately, what I think the American people want to know is that their democracy is safe, that their votes will actually count, and that the election results can't just be thrown out. Because after all, that's what our democracy is ultimately built on, is our cherished right to vote and our right to choose our own leaders and set the course for our country. So ultimately, I think that that's what people are really tuned in for.
Do you think that people are curious to know whether or not Trump will be indicted at the end of all of this, if crimes were really committed?
I do think so. I think that's what's looming over a lot of this, a lot of these hearings. I mean, the hearings, of course, are not a court of law. This is a different sort of proceeding. But the way that the hearings seem to be shaping up is that the bipartisan members are putting together a case that could almost go into court and be used by prosecutors to prosecute anybody who was involved in this conspiracy, from all the way at the lowest level, from people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, all the way up to Trump's advisors and even Trump himself. So I think that's why the committee is meticulously laying out the facts, using Republican witnesses to do it. And I do think a lot of Americans are going to want to see whether an indictment of Trump comes out of this. Again, most Americans want accountability. Most Americans support the notion that no one is above the law in this country, not even a president.
So let's say he is indicted, he is charged. What happens next? Could he still run for president?
Well, I think that he would be allowed to run for president especially if he was indicted, if a trial was going on, he would still be allowed to run. And we've seen that Donald Trump busts through all norms. I mean, most presidential candidates, of course, would not run under such circumstances. I think Trump likes to, he's a trailblazer in many respects. And one of those respects is not following the norms of democracy and sometimes not following the law. But yes, he would be able to run if a trial was ongoing. And even if he was convicted, there could be a basis for him still running. But I'd have to say that there are provisions of the Constitution that say that anybody who participated in an insurrection are precluded from running for federal office. And I would hope that that would be applied to Donald Trump.
All right. Michael Sozan is the senior fellow from the Center for American Progress. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate your insight.
Thank you.